James Whitmore never imagined that 3 words could destroy everything he built. The boardroom of Whitmore Construction Group, located on the 15th floor of a glass tower in Britamart's business district, smelled of expensive leather and coffee imported from Italy. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Auckland stretched beneath a grey May sky, the harbour shimmering cold and distant. James sat at the head of the mahogany table, his navy suit perfectly tailored, his Patek Philippe watch catching the light as he signed termination letters. 10 employees, 10 families. He didn't pause between signatures. Support the channel by leaving your like and comment, and let's get to our story. That's the last one, his assistant Derek said quietly, collecting the papers. James leaned back, rolling his shoulders. No guilt, no hesitation. The company posted end at $28 million in revenue last year. Numbers didn't lie. Weak performers had to go. That's how empires stayed strong. That's what his father taught him before handing over the keys to the kingdom 3 years ago. James was 39 now, and every decision he made reinforced one simple truth. Money bought everything. Loyalty, silence, control. He stood, adjusting his cufflinks. The meeting was over. It was 4:47 p.m. on a Saturday, which meant most of the building was empty. He preferred it that way. Fewer people, fewer distractions. Derek gathered his leather briefcase and followed James toward the elevators. The corridor was silent except for the hum of ventilation systems and the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner somewhere below. The elevator doors opened. James stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. As the doors began to close, a hand slipped through, triggering the sensor. A young woman entered, slightly breathless, carrying a small insulated bag. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a faded navy jacket. Her dark hair was pulled into a simple ponytail. She smiled briefly, a polite, automatic smile, and pressed the button for the 6th floor. James didn't look at her. He checked his phone, scrolling through emails he'd already read. Derek, however, glanced at the woman, then at the insulated bag she held carefully in both hands. 6th floor? Derek said, making conversation. You work here? No, the woman said. Her voice was steady, warm. I'm just dropping off lunch for my mum. Derek nodded. The elevator stopped at 6. The woman stepped out, turning briefly to nod goodbye before disappearing down the hallway. The doors closed. That's the cleaner's daughter, Derek said casually, adjusting his tie. Margaret Thompson. Works nights and weekends. Been here forever. James glanced up from his phone. Something about the way Derek said it, the cleaner's daughter, sparked an idea, a cruel, entertaining idea, the kind that made dull corporate life more interesting. The annual dinner is next Friday, James said slowly, a smile forming. At Orbit 360. Derek raised an eyebrow. Right, ends $180,000 event, 160 guests, biggest night of the year. James's smile widened. Send an invitation to Miss Thompson, the daughter. Derek blinked. The cleaner's daughter? Yes, make it formal. Tell her it's a generous opportunity to experience the world of successful people. Say she's a special guest. Derek hesitated. You're serious? Completely. I want to see how she tries to fit in. It'll be educational. Derek didn't argue. He never did. That was why James kept him around. The elevator reached the ground floor. James walked out into the lobby, already imagining the scene. The girl in borrowed clothes, struggling with silverware, surrounded by Auckland's elite. It would be priceless, a reminder to everyone present about the natural order of things. Some people belonged at the top, others belonged cleaning the floors. He drove home to his penthouse in Ponsonby, a 3-bedroom sanctuary of marble, glass, and imported furniture. The view overlooked the city, glittering, distant, untouchable. He poured himself a whiskey, Glenmorangie 18, and stood by the window. Below, the streets pulsed with life he never touched. Restaurants he'd never visit, neighborhoods he'd never walked through. James Whitmore had everything money could buy, except, perhaps, a reason to feel anything real. 3 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, Hannah Thompson stood in the small kitchen of the house she shared with her mother in Manukau. The house was modest, just 52 square meters, but spotlessly clean. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, illuminating the wooden table where an envelope sat, unopened, formal, cream-colored, expensive paper. Hannah stared at it, her arms crossed. Margaret stood beside her, still wearing her work uniform, a pale blue shirt with the building services logo stitched on the chest. Her hands, rough from years of scrubbing floors and wiping windows, rested on the edge of the table. "Open it," Margaret said quietly. Hannah picked up the envelope, turning it over. Her name was printed in elegant script. She tore it open carefully, pulling out a single card embossed with gold lettering. "You are cordially invited to the Whitmore Construction Group annual gala dinner. Orbit 360-degree dining, Sky Tower. Friday, 7 p.m. Dress, formal." Beneath it, a handwritten note, a special opportunity to experience the world of success. "We look forward to welcoming you. James Whitmore, CEO." Hannah read it twice, then she set it down. "This doesn't make sense," she said. Margaret's expression darkened. "That man is not kind, Hannah. Why would he invite you?" Hannah looked at her mother. Margaret was 53, her face lined with exhaustion and years of early mornings. She'd raised Hannah alone since David Thompson died 12 years ago in a construction accident. David had been 36, a subcontractor, no compensation, no apology. Just a body returned and a funeral Margaret paid for with money she didn't have. Hannah had been 13 then. She remembered her mother working 3 jobs for 2 years, refusing charity, refusing to break. Margaret taught her one thing above all else: dignity wasn't negotiable. "I know what this is," Hannah said quietly. "He wants to humiliate me." "Then don't go." Hannah shook her head. "Mum, I'm not going to hide. If he wants to humiliate me, he's going to learn something instead." Margaret reached for her daughter's hand. "You don't have to prove anything to people like him." "I'm not proving anything. I'm just showing up as myself." Hannah worked part-time as an English teacher at a community school, earning about $2,400 a month. She studied law at the University of Auckland at night, on a full academic scholarship she'd earned through sheer merit. She was in her 3rd year now, top of most of her classes, fluent in English and conversational in Te Reo Maori. Every step she'd taken, she'd built herself. On Thursday, she went to a second-hand boutique in Newmarket and found a simple black dress. Elegant, knee-length. It cost half her monthly salary. She didn't flinch. She bought it along with modest black heels she could walk in. Friday arrived cold and clear. Hannah spent the afternoon preparing. She showered, dried her hair carefully, applied minimal makeup. She looked at herself in the mirror, not trying to be someone else, just herself, presented with care. Margaret watched from the doorway, her eyes filled with worry and pride. "You look beautiful. I look like me." Hannah kissed her mother's cheek and left at 6:30 p.m., taking 2 buses to reach the city centre. The Sky Tower rose above Auckland like a needle piercing the clouds, its observation decks glowing against the darkening sky. She arrived at 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes late intentionally. She wanted to walk into a room already full. The elevator to Orbit 360-degree was mirrored and silent. Hannah watched her reflection rise. Her heart beat steadily. She wasn't nervous. She was ready. The doors opened. The restaurant was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows curved around the entire space, offering a 360-degree view of Auckland. The harbour stretched dark and glittering to the north, the city lights sprawling in every direction. Inside, crystal chandeliers caught the light, reflecting off polished silverware and champagne flutes. The air smelled of expensive perfume, seared lamb, and money. 160 people filled the space. Men in tailored tuxedos, women in gowns that cost more than most monthly salaries. Laughter echoed softly, the kind of controlled, refined laughter that came from people who never raised their voices. Waiters moved silently between tables, pouring wine that cost $300 a bottle. Hannah stepped into the room. Heads turned. Not many, but enough. A few curious glances. A woman in an emerald dress leaned toward her companion, whispering. Hannah kept her chin up, her expression calm. A hostess approached, checking the guest list. "Hannah Thompson?" "Yes." The hostess smiled professionally, gesturing toward a table near the center of the room. "Right this way." Hannah followed, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She could feel eyes on her. Not hostile, just assessing. Who was she? Why was she here? She reached the table and sat, smoothing her dress. Around her, conversations resumed. The moment passed. James Whitmore stood near the bar, a glass of scotch in his hand, watching. He'd seen her enter. Perfect. She looked exactly as he'd imagined. Out of place, trying too hard, a little lost. Derek appeared beside him, glancing toward Hannah. "She actually came," Derek said quietly. "Of course she did. People like her don't turn down opportunities like this." Derek said nothing. James took a long sip of his drink, savoring it. The evening was unfolding exactly as planned. Dinner was served in courses: pan-seared scallops with cauliflower puree, slow-roasted lamb with rosemary jus. Each dish arrived like a work of art, arranged with precision. Hannah ate slowly, using the silverware correctly, listening to the conversations around her. Two investors discussing property markets, a lawyer complaining about new regulations, a woman bragging about her recent trip to the Maldives. No one spoke to her directly. She didn't mind. She observed. She listened. She understood exactly what this was. At 8:30 p.m., James stood. He tapped his glass with a fork, the sharp sound cutting through the conversations. The room quieted. All eyes turned toward him. "Good evening, everyone," James said, his voice smooth, confident. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This company exists because of the incredible people in this room, our partners, our investors, our leaders." Polite applause. James smiled, setting down his glass. "But tonight, I want to introduce someone special, someone who represents a different side of Whitmore Construction, a reminder of the hard-working people who keep our operations running smoothly." He gestured toward Hannah. Every head in the room turned. Hannah Thompson, daughter of our dedicated Margaret, who has maintained our office spaces for 17 years. A few uncertain chuckles rippled through the crowd. Hannah felt the weight of 160 stares. She didn't move. James's smile widened. "Hannah, why don't you stand up? Tell everyone, what do your parents do?" The room fell silent, expectant, hungry for entertainment. Hannah remained seated for 3 long seconds. She felt her mother's voice in her mind. Dignity isn't negotiable. She stood slowly, her hands steady. She looked directly at James Whitmore, and when she spoke, her voice was clear, unwavering. "She raised me." The silence deepened. Confused glances exchanged. James's smile faltered slightly. Hannah continued, her voice carrying across the room. "My mother, Margaret Thompson, has worked as a cleaner for 17 years. She wakes up at 4:30 a.m. She takes 2 buses to get to work. She cleans offices for people who rarely know her name. And do you know what she did with every dollar she earned in those 17 years? She paused, letting the question hang. "She raised me. Alone. After my father died in a construction accident 12 years ago, working, by the way, on a Whitmore construction site. He was 36 years old. David Thompson, a subcontractor. We never received compensation. Not a cent." The atmosphere shifted. Uncomfortable. Tense. People stared at their plates. James stood frozen, his expression blank. "My mother paid for my books, my school fees, my bus fare. Today I study law at the University of Auckland on a full academic scholarship. I work, I study, and I still prepare my mother's lunch every day I can, because that's how real people show love, not with dinners that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to inflate their own egos." She looked around the room, meeting eyes that quickly looked away. "Does anyone here know how much the person who cleans your office earns? How much effort it takes to serve your table, to scrub your floors, to make your life comfortable while remaining invisible?" No one answered. The silence was suffocating. Hannah picked up her small clutch bag. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Whitmore, but I have constitutional law class at 9 p.m., and unlike you, I can't afford to miss it. My scholarship depends on my attendance." She walked toward the exit. Her footsteps were the only sound in the room. No one moved. No one spoke. She reached the elevator, pressed the button, and stepped inside. The doors closed. James Whitmore stood motionless, his face pale. His hand trembled slightly as he set down his glass. Around him, people began to murmur, low, uncomfortable conversations. A woman near the back, Diane Chen, a prominent investor, stood, placed her napkin on the table, and walked out without a word. Derek approached James carefully. "Sir, not now," James said, his voice barely audible. The rest of the evening continued, but the energy had shifted. Conversations were forced. Laughter felt hollow. James left before dessert was served, driving home in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. He didn't sleep that night. He lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Hannah's words. "She raised me." 3 words. Simple, devastating, true. By Sunday morning, his phone was flooded with messages, a link, a video. He opened it. Someone had recorded the entire exchange. Hannah standing, her voice steady, her words cutting through the opulence like a blade. The video had been posted anonymously Friday night. By Sunday, it had 1.2 million views. The comments were brutal. "This is what privilege looks like. Disgusting. She raised me." 3 words that said everything. James Whitmore just became the face of corporate arrogance in NZ. The hashtag #she raised me was trending. James's name was attached to every post. Photos of him at charity events, at galas, at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, all now reframed as evidence of hypocrisy. He sat in his living room, the curtains drawn, the city invisible beyond the glass. For the first time in his life, James Whitmore felt something unfamiliar. Shame. Real, deep, inescapable shame. He picked up his phone and called Derek. "I need you to find something. Everything you can on David Thompson, the accident in 2014. And I need the files on every workplace incident we've had in the last 10 years. Every single one." "Sir, are you sure? Just do it." Derek arrived Monday afternoon with a box of files. They sat in James's home office, spreading documents across the desk. Incident reports, insurance claims, subcontractor agreements. And there, buried in a file marked 2014, was David Thompson's name. Date of incident, June 14th, 2014. Location, residential development, West Auckland. Cause, scaffolding collapse. Deceased, David Thompson, age 36. Status, subcontracted labor. Compensation, none. Liability transferred to subcontracting firm, which filed for bankruptcy 3 months later. James read the report 3 times. He found photos. David Thompson had been a father, a husband, a man who worked with his hands to provide for his family. And when he died, James's company had walked away clean, legally clean, morally bankrupt. He kept digging. 8 workplace accidents over 10 years, 3 deaths, 5 serious injuries, all subcontracted labor. All compensated minimally or not at all, all buried in legal language that protected the company. James closed the last file. He sat in silence for a long time. Then he searched for Hannah Thompson online. It took minutes to find her. LinkedIn profile, university honors list, 3 published articles on workers' rights and corporate accountability, volunteer legal aid clinic in Manukau Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. She wasn't the cleaner's daughter. She was Hannah Thompson, future lawyer, brilliant, principled, strong, and he had tried to humiliate her for sport. Tuesday morning arrived cold and grey. James woke at 5 a.m., though he hadn't truly slept. He'd spent the night reading Hannah's articles, watching interviews she'd given at university events, tracing the outline of a life built on merit and resilience. A life so different from his own, it felt like studying a foreign language. He made coffee he didn't drink. He stood by the window watching Auckland wake up. Trucks delivering goods, buses carrying workers, the city machinery grinding forward while he stood still. His phone buzzed constantly. Messages from board members, concerned investors. A terse email from his mother, who lived in retirement in Queenstown and rarely contacted him. "What have you done?" He didn't answer any of them. By Wednesday, 3 clients had quietly requested meetings to reassess their partnerships. The company's PR team sent frantic emails suggesting damage control strategies, public apologies, charity donations, rebranding initiatives. James ignored them all. He'd spent 39 years building walls. Now they were crumbling, and for the first time, he wasn't trying to rebuild them. On Thursday afternoon, he drove to the University of Auckland. The law school was a modern building near the city campus, glass and concrete, students moving between classes with backpacks and coffee cups. James parked across the street and waited. He didn't know Hannah's schedule. He didn't have a plan. He just waited. At 4:15 p.m., he saw her. She emerged from the building with 2 other students laughing at something one of them said. She wore jeans, a grey hoodie, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked young, unburdened, nothing like the woman who'd stood in a room full of Auckland's elite and dismantled him with 3 words. The other students said goodbye, heading in different directions. Hannah walked toward the bus stop, her backpack slung over one shoulder. James got out of his car. His heart was pounding. He crossed the street, footsteps quick. "Hannah!" She turned. Recognition flashed across her face, followed immediately by something harder. Anger. Disgust. She kept walking. "Please, I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." "I know, but I'm asking anyway." She stopped, turning to face him fully. Students passed around them, a river flowing past 2 stones. Her eyes were steady, unyielding. "What do you want, Mr. Whitmore? An apology? Absolution? You humiliated me in front of 160 people for entertainment, and now you want what? Sympathy? No, I want to tell you that you were right. About everything." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Congratulations, you've discovered basic human decency." "I found the files," James said quietly. "Your father, David Thompson, June 14th, 2014, scaffolding collapse. I found all of them, 8 accidents, 3 deaths, all subcontracted labor, all buried." Hannah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Pain, old and deep. "My father worked 16-hour days," she said, her voice low. "He came home exhausted, too tired to play with me, but he still read me stories before bed, every single night. He died because your company cut costs by hiring the cheapest subcontractors, and when the scaffolding collapsed, you transferred liability and walked away." "I know. You were 27 then, fresh out of business school, already learning how to protect profits over people." James felt the accusation like a physical blow, because it was true. He'd been there. He'd watched his father handle it. He'd learned the lesson: protect the company, always. "I can't change what happened," he said, "but I can try to make it right." "You can't make it right. My father is dead, 12 years of his life gone. 12 years of my mother working herself to exhaustion. 12 years of me growing up without a father. You can't buy that back." "I know, but I found 7 other cases, families who never received proper compensation, workers who were injured and discarded. I'm opening the company records, all of them, and I want you to handle it." Hannah stared at him. "Handle what?" "The legal case. Sue us. Sue me. Every family, every victim. I'll cooperate fully. No lawyers protecting me. No settlements with silence clauses. Real justice. Real compensation." "Why would you do that?" "Because you're right. Because I've spent my whole life stepping on people to feel tall, and I'm tired of being that person, because 3 words from you did more damage than any lawsuit could, and maybe that's what I needed." Hannah shook her head slowly. "This isn't about you feeling better about yourself. This is about real people who suffered real consequences." "I know. That's why I'm asking you. You're the only person I trust to do this right. You don't know me. I know enough. You're top of your class. You volunteer at legal aid clinics. You prepare lunch for your mother every day, even though you're drowning in coursework. You stood in front of Auckland's elite and told the truth when it would have been easier to stay quiet. That's more than most people would do." A bus arrived at the stop behind them. Hannah glanced at it, then back at James. Students boarded. The bus pulled away. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." She adjusted her backpack, preparing to leave. Then she stopped, turning back. "If I do this, and I'm not saying I will, it won't be for you. It'll be for my mother, for my father, for everyone your company used and discarded. I understand. And you don't get credit for basic human decency. You don't get applause for finally doing the right thing. I know." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she walked away, her figure disappearing into the flow of students heading toward the next bus stop. James stood alone on the sidewalk. The sky was darkening, the streetlights beginning to flicker on. He felt hollow, exhausted, and for the first time in years, something that might have been hope. Hannah didn't call. For 5 days, James heard nothing. He went through the motions, board meetings he barely paid attention to, emails he answered mechanically. Derek watched him carefully, asking no questions. The media storm continued, more articles, opinion pieces, calls for investigations into the company's labor practices. On the 6th day, a Tuesday morning, his phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Hannah Thompson. I've discussed it with my mother and with 2 professors at the law school." "I'll take the case, but I have conditions." James exhaled slowly. "Anything. First, full access to all company records. No redactions, no hidden files. Second, you personally meet with every family involved. Not through lawyers, you, face to face. Third, whatever settlements are reached, they're public. No NDAs. And fourth, structural changes to how the company hires and protects workers. Enforceable, documented, permanent. Agreed. All of it. I'll send you a formal contract. You'll sign it, and then we begin. When can we meet to discuss details? Friday, 6 p.m. The cafe on Karangahape Road, near the intersection with Pitt Street. It's called Verona. Do you know it? James didn't. He'd never been to that part of the city. "I'll find it. Come alone." "And Mr. Whitmore?" "Yes. Don't make me regret this." The line went dead. Friday evening, James drove to Karangahape Road. The neighborhood was different from the areas he frequented. Eclectic, vibrant, street art covering building walls, small shops and cafes tucked between older structures. He found Verona easily. It was small, maybe 12 tables, warm lighting, the smell of fresh coffee and baking bread. Nothing like the restaurants he usually visited. Hannah was already there, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open and a mug of tea. She wore a simple sweater, her hair tied back. She looked up as he entered, nodding toward the empty chair across from her. James sat. A waitress approached, young, friendly, with bright pink hair. "What can I get you?" James glanced at the menu on the chalkboard. "Just coffee. Black. Long black, flat white, or Americano?" He hesitated. "Flat white." The waitress smiled and disappeared. Hannah closed her laptop. "I've drafted a preliminary outline," she said, pulling out a folder. 8 cases total. 3 fatalities, 5 serious injuries. Estimated total compensation, based on precedent and adjusted for inflation, is approximately $6.5 million. James nodded. "Whatever the number is, it'll be paid. It's not just about money. It's about accountability. These families had their lives destroyed, and no one even acknowledged it." "I know." Hannah slid a document across the table. "This is the contract. Read it carefully." James did. 5 pages, dense legal language outlining exactly what she'd demanded. Full access, personal meetings, public settlements, structural reform. He reached the last page and signed without hesitation. Hannah watched him, her expression unreadable. She took the contract, checking the signature. "You signed that faster than I expected. I meant what I said. I want to do this right." The waitress returned with his coffee, setting it down gently. James took a sip. It was good, better than the expensive beans he bought online. Simple, honest. Hannah opened her laptop again. "We'll start with documentation. I need every incident report, every insurance claim, every communication related to these cases. Then we'll contact the families. Some may not want to participate. Trauma doesn't always want justice. Sometimes it just wants to be left alone. I'll respect whatever they decide." You'll have to face them. Look them in the eye. Hear what your company's negligence cost them. I will. She studied him. Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's because I was right. People hear hard truths all the time and never change. James set down his coffee. He thought about the question, really thought about it. Because that night at the dinner, I saw myself clearly for the first time. I saw what I'd become, and I hated it. I've spent my entire life believing that success meant accumulation, money, power, status. But you stood there with nothing but your integrity, and you had more than I ever will. I want to learn how to be that person. You can't be me. You can only be a better version of yourself. Then that's what I'll try to do. Hannah closed her laptop. This won't be easy. You're going to hear things that will haunt you. You're going to meet people whose pain you caused. And at the end of it, you don't get redemption. You just get to live with what you've done and try to be better. I understand. She finished her tea, gathering her things. I'll email you a list of documents I need by Monday. And Mr. Whitmore? James, please. She paused. James, don't do this to feel better about yourself. Do it because it's right. There's a difference. She left, the door chiming softly behind her. James sat alone at the table, his coffee growing cold, thinking about the difference between redemption and responsibility. The first meeting happened on a Wednesday afternoon in Manurewa, a suburb south of Auckland's city centre. The house was small, weatherboard painted pale blue, a modest garden with vegetables growing in neat rows. James arrived alone, as promised, parking his car 2 blocks away and walking the rest of the distance. Hannah was already there, waiting on the sidewalk. Are you ready? She asked. James nodded, though his hands were trembling slightly. He shoved them into his pockets. Hannah knocked. The door opened. A woman in her 60s stood there, grey hair pulled back, eyes sharp and cautious. Behind her, a man about James's age sat at the kitchen table, his right arm ending at the elbow. Mrs. Patel, this is James Whitmore, Hannah said gently. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Mrs. Patel stepped aside, saying nothing. They entered. The house smelled of curry and incense. Family photos covered the walls. Weddings, graduations, children laughing. James saw one photo in particular, a younger version of the man at the table, both arms intact, holding a small girl on his shoulders. That's my daughter, the man said, his voice flat. She was 3. She's 15 now. She barely remembers me before the accident. His name was Raj Patel. He'd been 32 when a crane malfunction at a Whitmore construction site crushed his arm. Subcontracted labor. Medical expenses covered minimally. No long-term disability support. He'd been a carpenter. Now he worked part-time at a grocery store, stocking shelves with one hand. James sat across from him. I'm sorry, he said, and the words felt impossibly small. Sorry doesn't pay for my daughter's school fees, Raj said. Sorry doesn't give me back 12 years of being able to hold my wife properly. Sorry is what people say when they don't have to live with the consequences. You're right. Mrs. Patel brought tea, setting cups down with controlled precision. Her hands shook slightly. She sat beside her son, her jaw tight. You people came to the hospital once, she said. A man in a suit. He had papers. He said if we signed, we'd get $15,000 and medical costs covered for 6 months. He said if we didn't sign, we'd get nothing. My son was on morphine, in pain, afraid. What choice did we have? James felt something crack inside his chest. That was unconscionable. You should have received full compensation, lifetime support, retraining, everything. But we didn't, Raj said. We got $15,000 and 6 months of doctor visits. Then nothing. Hannah opened her folder, sliding documents across the table. Based on current legal standards and precedent, you're entitled to approximately $850,000 in compensation, loss of income, medical expenses, pain and suffering, adjusted for the 12 years since the accident. Mrs. Patel stared at the number. Tears formed in her eyes, but didn't fall. That doesn't fix anything, Raj said quietly. No, James said. It doesn't, but it's what you should have had, what you deserved. and I'm here to make sure you receive it." They talked for 2 hours. Raj described the accident, the sound of metal snapping, the moment of impact, waking up in the hospital and being told his arm couldn't be saved. Mrs. Patel talked about watching her son struggle, about the depression that followed, the physical therapy that insurance wouldn't cover, the jobs he couldn't get because employers saw disability before skill. James listened. He didn't defend. He didn't explain. He just listened, absorbing every word like blows to the body. When they finally left, stepping back into the afternoon sunlight, James walked to his car and sat in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his vision blurred. Hannah appeared at the passenger window. She opened the door and slid in without asking. "That's one," she said quietly. "There are 7 more." James nodded, unable to speak. "It doesn't get easier. I don't want it to." They visited the second family on Friday, the third on Monday. Each meeting was its own kind of devastation. A widow whose husband had died from a fall, leaving her with 3 children and debt she'd spent 9 years repaying. A man paralyzed from the waist down, living in a modified apartment his sister paid for because he couldn't work. A woman with chronic pain from spinal injuries, her medical bills exceeding ends $200,000 over 8 years. James met them all. He sat in their homes. He looked at their faces. He heard their stories. And each time, he felt the weight of his complicity pressing down harder. By the 4th meeting, something began to shift between James and Hannah. They spent hours together, reviewing documents, preparing legal filings, traveling to meetings. In the car, they talked, at first about the case, then gradually about other things. "Why law?" James asked one evening, driving back from a meeting in Hamilton. The sun was setting, painting the highway gold and orange. Hannah was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say that words were tools. You could build with them or break with them. After he died, I watched my mother get broken by words, legal language, contracts she didn't understand, men in suits telling her she had no rights. I decided I wanted to be someone who used words to build, not break. You're good at it. I'm not finished learning yet, but I will be." James glanced at her. Her profile was calm, focused, the fading light catching in her hair. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just existed, fully and completely herself. It was something he'd never learned how to do. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You just did." He smiled despite himself. "Why did you agree to take this case? You could have destroyed me publicly, walked away, let the media do the rest. Why give me a chance to make it right?" Hannah turned to look at him. "Because justice isn't about revenge. It's about repair. And because I saw something in your eyes that day, you found me at the university. You weren't looking for absolution. You were looking for a way forward. That's different." "How?" "People who want absolution want the past erased. People who want a way forward accept the past and choose differently. I'm betting that you're the second kind." "What if you're wrong? Then I'll destroy you in court and move on." James laughed, a real, genuine laugh. It surprised him. When was the last time he'd laughed like that? They stopped at a small roadside cafe for dinner. Nothing fancy, just burgers and fries, the kind of place with plastic menus and vinyl booths. They ate slowly, the conversation drifting. Hannah told him about her students at the community school, about a 10-year-old boy who'd just learned to read full sentences and cried with joy. James told her about the first time he'd visited a construction site with his father, age 8, and how the noise and chaos had terrified him. "I thought you loved construction," Hannah said. "I loved the idea of building things. But my father didn't build. He managed, he stood in offices and moved money around. I learned to do the same. I don't think I've actually built anything in my life." "You're building something now." James looked at her. "Am I?" "Yes. It's just harder to see because you're building it with consequences instead of concrete." They left the cafe as night settled fully. In the car, driving through darkness broken by passing headlights, James felt something unfamiliar. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Purpose maybe, or connection. He glanced at Hannah, her face illuminated by the dashboard glow, her eyes watching the road ahead. He realized, with a jolt that felt like falling, that he didn't want this to end. Not the case, not the drives, not the conversations, not her. 3 months into the process, the case went public. Hannah filed the lawsuits formally. 8 separate claims, each meticulously documented, each demanding full accountability. The media response was immediate and intense. Headlines screamed across every major news outlet in New Zealand. Whitmore Construction sued by 8 families in workplace negligence case. CEO personally cooperating in lawsuit against his own company. She raised me. Lawyer takes on corporate giant, and he's helping her. James's phone exploded with calls. Board members demanding explanations. Investors threatening to pull funding. His mother calling from Queenstown, her voice cold with fury. "You're destroying everything your father built." "No," James said quietly. "I'm fixing what he broke." She hung up. The company's legal team tried to intervene. Senior partners arrived at James's office, briefcases full of strategies to minimize damage, settle quietly, protect assets. "We can fight this," the lead attorney said. A man named Peterson with silver hair and expensive cufflinks. "Discovery can be delayed. Settlements can be structured to avoid admission of guilt. We can—" "No," James said. "Mr. Whitmore, with all due respect, you're committing corporate suicide." "Then I'm committing corporate suicide. The board will remove you. Let them try." Peterson left, shaking his head. Derek remained, leaning against the doorframe. "You're really doing this," Derek said. "Yes." "Why?" James thought about Hannah's words. "Justice isn't about revenge, it's about repair." "Because I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror," he said finally. "And can you?" "Not yet, but I'm trying." The settlements were reached over the next 6 weeks. Each family received full compensation, amounts ranging from ENS $485,000 to ENS $1.2 million, totaling ENS $6.5 million. No NDAs, no silence clauses, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, personal letters of apology from James to each family, handwritten, imperfect, honest. But James didn't stop there. He implemented structural changes. Direct hiring of all construction workers, no more subcontractors to shield liability, comprehensive insurance, safety officers with authority to halt work, salary increases averaging 35% across all lower-wage positions, and a scholarship fund for children of company employees, starting with ends in $500,000 annually. The board threatened mutiny. 2 senior members resigned. 3 investors pulled out. The company's quarterly profits dropped by 18%. James didn't care. On a Saturday afternoon in late October, Hannah met him at his office to review final paperwork. The space was quieter now, fewer employees, less grandeur. James had sold the penthouse in Ponsonby. He lived now in a 2-bedroom apartment in Mount Eden, modest and practical. Hannah set down the last signed document. "It's done," she said. "All 8 families have received full payment. The structural changes are legally binding. The scholarship fund is established. Thank you. I didn't do this for you. I know, but thank you anyway." She gathered her papers, preparing to leave. James stood. "Can I ask you something else?" Hannah paused. "Go ahead. Would you have dinner with me? Not about the case, just dinner." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I've spent 3 months working with you, and I've learned more about being human than I learned in 39 years before that. Because you're brilliant and challenging, and you make me want to be better, because I'd like to know you outside of lawsuits and legal documents." "James, if the answer is no, I understand, but I had to ask." Hannah adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "There's a restaurant in Manukau. Nothing fancy. My mother and I go there sometimes. Meet me there next Friday, 7 p.m. She wrote the address on a sticky note and handed it to him. Then she left. James stood alone in his office, holding the small piece of paper like it was something precious, which, he realized, it was. Friday arrived with rain, soft, persistent, turning Auckland streets slick and reflective. James drove to Manukau in the early evening, his windshield wipers keeping steady rhythm. The restaurant Hannah had chosen was called Taste of Home, tucked between a laundromat and a small grocery store on a quiet street. The sign was hand-painted, the windows glowing warm against the grey weather. James parked and sat for a moment, watching rain stream down the glass. He was nervous, actually nervous. When was the last time he'd felt this way? He couldn't remember. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, no suit, no expensive watch, just himself. He went inside. The restaurant was small, maybe 15 tables, walls painted terracotta, colourful woven baskets hanging as decoration. The air smelled incredible. Roasted meat, fresh bread, spices he couldn't name. Soft music played, something acoustic and gentle. A few families occupied tables, children laughing, parents talking in low, comfortable voices. Hannah sat at a corner table. She wore a dark green dress, her hair loose, simple silver earrings catching the light. She looked up as he approached, and something softened in her expression. "You found it," she said. "Your directions were good." He sat. A waitress appeared, middle-aged with kind eyes and an accent that sounded Pacifica. "Good evening. What can I get you both?" Hannah ordered without looking at the menu. "The lamb kofta platter for 2, please, and 2 ginger beers." The waitress nodded approvingly and disappeared. James raised an eyebrow. "I took the liberty," Hannah said. "This is my favorite dish here, trust me." "I do." The words hung between them, heavier than James intended. Hannah looked at him carefully, as if trying to determine whether he meant it. "How have you been?" she asked. "Busy. The board is trying to force me out. 3 more investors withdrew. The media is still calling daily." "Regrets?" "None." "Really?" James leaned back, considering the question honestly. "I've lost money. I've lost respect from people I used to admire. I've lost the company my father built, or at least the version of it he would recognize. But I sleep better now than I have in 10 years. So no regrets." The ginger beers arrived, condensation beading on the bottles. They drank. The taste was sharp, sweet, refreshing. James realized he was smiling. "What?" Hannah asked. "I don't think I've ever had ginger beer before." "You're joking." "I'm not. I've had champagne that costs $400 a bottle, but never ginger beer." Hannah shook her head, but she was smiling too. "You've been missing out." The food arrived on a large platter. Lamb kofta skewers, golden and fragrant. Flatbread still warm. Hummus, tabbouleh, pickled vegetables, tzatziki. The presentation was simple, but generous. Hannah began serving portions onto both plates, her movements practiced and easy. "My mother brought me here when I was 12, she said. "Right after my father died. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. She ordered this exact meal and told me that grief didn't mean we stopped living. It meant we learned to live differently." James picked up a piece of lamb. The meat was tender, spiced with cumin and coriander, perfectly charred. He closed his eyes briefly. It was possibly the best thing he'd ever tasted. "This is incredible. I told you to trust me." They ate slowly. Hannah told him about her week, a case she'd been assisting with at the legal aid clinic, a domestic violence situation where she'd helped a woman secure a protection order. James told her about the scholarship fund, about the first recipient they'd selected, a 17-year-old girl named Emma whose father worked as a carpenter for the company. Emma wanted to study engineering. The scholarship would cover her entire degree. "Her father cried when I told him," James said quietly. "He said no one had ever given his family anything without expecting something in return. That must have felt good. It felt like the first worthwhile thing I've done in my life." Hannah set down her fork. "You can't erase the past, James." "I know. And you can't build a new identity on guilt." "I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to do better." "Why?" The question was direct, challenging. James met her gaze. "Because you showed me what integrity looks like. Because I spent my whole life believing that power meant never being wrong, and you proved that real strength is admitting when you are. Because every day I spend trying to be better is a day I'm not the person I was at that dinner." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Outside, rain continued falling, soft and steady against the windows. "I'm still not sure about you," she said finally. "I don't blame you. You've done good things these past few months, real meaningful things. But I've seen people perform goodness before. I've seen people do the right thing when cameras are watching and go back to who they were when they're not. What would convince you I'm not performing? Time, consistency, choices you make when there's no benefit to you." James nodded slowly. "Then I'll wait, as long as it takes." They finished dinner, sharing the last pieces of bread, conversation drifting to lighter topics. Hannah told him about learning Te Reo Maori, about stumbling over pronunciations until her tutor laughed so hard he couldn't breathe. James told her about selling the penthouse, about the realtor's horrified expression when he said he was moving to a 2-bedroom apartment. "She kept asking if I understood what I was giving up," James said. "She showed me market analyses, investment projections. She couldn't comprehend why I'd choose less." "Why did you?" "Because I didn't need that much space. I didn't need the status. I needed to stop living like my worth was measured in square meters and harbor views." "And do you miss it?" James considered. "Sometimes. Then I remember how lonely I was in that huge space, and I realize I don't miss it at all. I miss the idea of it, but ideas don't keep you warm." Hannah smiled, something genuine and unguarded. James felt his chest tighten. God, she was beautiful. Not in the polished, curated way of the women he used to date. In a way that was real and unfiltered and entirely her own. They left the restaurant at 9:30 p.m. The rain had softened to mist. They stood under the small awning, neither quite ready to leave. "Thank you for coming," Hannah said. "Thank you for inviting me." "James, I know, you're not sure. That's okay. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to prove that this is real." Hannah looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "What is this, exactly?" "Honestly, I don't know. But I know I've never felt this way before. I've never wanted to be better for someone. I've never cared about what someone thought of me beyond what they could do for me. You make me want to be the person you see when you look at me, the person who's trying, even if he's failing." "You're not failing." "I'm not succeeding either. But I'm here. I'm trying. And if all you ever want from me is friendship or professional respect or nothing at all, I'll accept that. But I had to tell you." Hannah stepped closer. She reached up and touched his face, her hand gentle against his cheek. James froze, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever moment this was. "You're confusing," she said softly. "You're infuriating and complicated, and you've done terrible things, but you're also trying to fix them, and I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything. Just let me keep trying." She dropped her hand, stepping back. "I need time, James. I need to see who you are when this case is over, when the media stops watching, when there's no audience. I need to know if this version of you is real or if it's just another performance." "How long?" "I don't know. Maybe months. Maybe longer." "I'll wait." Hannah pulled her jacket tighter against the mist. "I should go. My mother worries when I'm out late. Can I drive you?" "I'm meeting her nearby, but thank you." She turned to leave, then paused. "James?" "Yes? Tonight was nice. Really nice." She walked away, disappearing around the corner. James stood alone under the awning, rain misting around him, feeling something that might have been hope or might have been heartbreak. Maybe both. The months that followed were strange. James and Hannah didn't date exactly, but they existed in each other's orbits. They met for coffee occasionally, always at Hannah's invitation, always at modest cafes in neighborhoods James had never visited. They talked about everything and nothing, books, politics, whether Auckland's traffic was getting worse or if everyone just complained more, the casual intimacy of people learning each other slowly. James continued changing. He sold his luxury car, buying a modest sedan instead. He donated half his remaining savings to workers' rights organizations and legal aid programs. He showed up at the company's construction sites unannounced, talking to workers, learning their names, asking about safety concerns. Some employees were suspicious, others warmed gradually. A foreman named Tom, who'd worked for the company for 23 years, pulled James aside one afternoon. "I don't know what happened to you, boss, but whatever it was, keep doing it. This is the first time I've felt like someone at the top actually gives a damn about us." James didn't tell him about Hannah, but he thought about her words constantly. Time, consistency, choices made when no one was watching. In January, 7 months after the Orbit 360 dinner, Hannah invited him to her graduation rehearsal. Not the ceremony itself, just the rehearsal. James arrived at the university hall, sitting in the back, watching Hannah walk across the stage in jeans and a t-shirt, practicing receiving her diploma. She was graduating with honors, top 5 in her class. Afterward, she found him in the hallway. "You came," she said. "You invited me. Of course I came. The actual ceremony is next week, Saturday at 2 p.m. You don't have to come, but I'll be there." Hannah smiled. "Okay." She started to leave, then turned back. "My mother will be there too. She wants to meet you. Properly, I mean." James's stomach tightened. "Does she know?" "She knows everything. She's read every article. She watched the video. She knows what you did and what you're trying to do, and she wants to meet the man who turned her daughter's humiliation into justice. I'm terrified of her." "Good. You should be." Hannah left, and James stood alone in the hallway, terrified and honored in equal measure. The graduation ceremony arrived clear and bright. James sat in the audience, surrounded by proud families, watching as graduates crossed the stage one by one. When Hannah's name was called, Hannah Margaret Thompson, the applause was thunderous. She walked across the stage, head high, receiving her diploma with a smile that could have lit the entire room. James applauded until his hands hurt. In the row ahead of him, he saw a woman stand, tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone. Margaret Thompson, Hannah's mother, the woman who'd raised a brilliant, principled, unstoppable daughter on a cleaner's salary. After the ceremony, James waited outside. Families swarmed everywhere, taking photos, celebrating. He stood apart, uncertain whether he belonged. Then he saw them, Hannah in her graduation gown, diploma in hand, laughing at something her mother said. Margaret was smaller than he expected, her grey hair neatly styled, her face lined with years of hard work and harder choices. She saw James watching and said something to Hannah. They approached together. "Mr. Whitmore," Margaret said. Her voice was steady, firm, the same voice that had raised a daughter alone, that had survived 17 years of pre-dawn shifts and dismissive glances. "Mrs. Thompson." James extended his hand. She looked at it for a long moment before shaking it. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "My daughter tells me you've changed," Margaret said, "that you're trying to make things right." "I am. Trying isn't the same as doing." "No, ma'am, it isn't." Margaret studied his face the way someone might study a painting in a gallery, searching for authenticity beneath the surface. Hannah stood between them, watching the exchange with careful eyes. "My husband died working for your company," Margaret said. "David, he was a good man, a careful man. But careful doesn't matter when corners are cut and safety is optional." James felt the familiar weight of guilt pressing down. "I know. I've read the reports. I've seen what happened. And I can't—" "I'm not finished," Margaret interrupted. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority. "David died, and I worked 3 jobs to keep my daughter fed and in school. I cleaned toilets in buildings where people made more in a day than I made in a month. I was invisible, disposable, until my daughter stood in front of Auckland's elite and reminded them that invisible people are still people." "She did more than that," James said quietly. "She showed me that I'd spent my entire life being blind." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Hannah says you've paid every family what they're owed, that you've changed how the company operates, that you've created opportunities for workers' children." "Yes. Why?" It was the same question everyone asked. James had answered it dozens of times, but somehow, standing before this woman who'd sacrificed everything for her daughter, the answer felt different. "Because your daughter asked me if I knew what the person who cleaned my office earned, and I realized I didn't. I'd never thought to ask. I'd never thought about the human cost of my comfort. She made me see people I'd spent my life looking through, and once you see them, you can't unsee them." Margaret nodded slowly. "That sounds like my Hannah. She's remarkable. Yes, she is. And if you hurt her, Mr. Whitmore, there's no amount of money or apologies that will save you from me. Do you understand?" "Completely." Margaret turned to Hannah, switching to a gentler tone. "I'm hungry. Let's get lunch. You're invited, Mr. Whitmore, if you'd like to join us." It wasn't really an invitation. It was a test. James understood that immediately. "I'd be honored." They went to a small Vietnamese restaurant in Otahuhu, the kind of place with plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting and food that tasted like someone's grandmother made it with love. Margaret ordered for all three of them, without asking preferences. Spring rolls, po, fresh summer rolls with peanut sauce. They ate, and Margaret asked James questions. Where did he grow up? What did his parents do? Did he have siblings? What did he do for fun? The questions were casual, conversational, but James understood they were also an interrogation. Margaret was mapping him, understanding who he was beneath the money and the title. James answered honestly. He talked about his father, about learning that success meant dominance. He talked about his mother, who'd cared more about social standing than substance. He admitted he had no real hobbies, no close friends, no life outside of work until recently. "That's lonely," Margaret said simply. Yes, it was. Hannah listened, eating her pho slowly, her eyes moving between her mother and James. At one point, Margaret excused herself to use the restroom. As soon as she was out of earshot, Hannah leaned forward. "She likes you," Hannah said. "How can you tell? She threatened me." "That's how I can tell. She only threatens people she thinks might be worth keeping around." James laughed, surprised. "Your mother is terrifying." "Good. She should be." Margaret returned and they finished lunch. When the bill came, James reached for it. Margaret was faster. "My daughter's graduation. I'm paying." "Mrs. Thompson, please. I've been paying for my daughter's achievements her whole life, Mr. Whitmore. This one is mine." James understood. This wasn't about money. This was about pride, about ownership, about a mother's right to celebrate her daughter on her terms. He backed down. Outside the restaurant, Margaret hugged Hannah tightly. "I'm so proud of you, baby." "I know, Mum." Margaret turned to James. "You can walk my daughter home. I'll take the bus." "I can drive you both." "I'm taking the bus. I've taken it for 17 years. I know the way." She left before James could argue further. Hannah watched her mother disappear down the street, a small smile on her face. "She planned that," Hannah said. "What?" "She wanted to give us time alone. That was deliberate. Your mother is subtle." "My mother is many things. Subtle is not one of them." They walked through Otahuhu, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. The neighborhood was alive, shops blasting music, children playing football in the street, people greeting each other in half a dozen languages. It was so different from the sterile wealth of Ponsonby, so full of life and texture and authenticity. "I grew up here," Hannah said. "This street, that corner store is where I bought lollies with pocket money my dad gave me. That park is where I learned to ride a bike. After he died, I thought we'd have to move. But my mum fought to keep the house. She said I'd already lost my father. I wasn't losing my home, too. She's an incredible woman. She is, and she's the reason I am who I am. Every good thing about me came from watching her refuse to break." They reached Hannah's house, the same modest structure James had seen in photos during the case research. Small, neat, a home built on love rather than money. Hannah turned to face him. "James, I need to tell you something." His heart quickened. "Okay. These past 7 months, I've been watching you. Not just the public stuff, the lawsuits, the reforms, the scholarships. I've been watching how you treat people when you think no one's noticing, how you talk to wait staff, how you listen when people speak, how you show up even when it's inconvenient. And I think you're real. I think the change is real. I think you're genuinely trying to be better, not just look better." "I am, but I'm still scared." "Of what?" Hannah looked down at her hands. of trusting this, of trusting you. You hurt people, James, systematically, for years. And yes, you're making amends. But how do I know this isn't just temporary? How do I know you won't wake up one day and decide this version of yourself is too hard, too uncomfortable, and go back to being who you were? James stepped closer, not touching her, just close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. You don't know, he said. I can't prove the future. I can only show you the present every single day and hope that eventually you'll trust that this is who I am now, not who I was, not who I might become, who I am. That's not very reassuring. No, but it's honest. Hannah smiled slightly. You've gotten better at honesty. I had a good teacher. They stood there, the afternoon stretching around them, the sounds of the neighborhood filling the comfortable silence. I'm not ready yet, Hannah said finally. To be whatever this could be, I need more time. I know, but I'm not saying no. I'm saying not yet. That's enough. Hannah reached out, taking his hand. The touch was brief, barely a few seconds, but it sent electricity through James's entire body. Thank you for coming today, she said. It meant something to me and to my mum. Thank you for letting me be here. She went inside. James walked back to his car, the feeling of her hand in his, lingering like a phantom sensation. He drove home slowly, in no hurry, replaying every moment. The months continued. James settled into his new life. He hired a new management team focused on ethical practices. He took a salary cut, redistributing the difference to worker benefits. He started volunteering at a community center in Manukau, teaching basic business skills to aspiring entrepreneurs. He was terrible at it at first, too formal, too distant, but he learned. He adapted. Hannah passed the bar exam in March. James sent flowers to her office at the legal aid clinic where she'd taken a position. Simple flowers, daisies, not roses. She texted him a photo of them in a mason jar on her desk with a single word, perfect. They continued seeing each other irregularly. Coffee every few weeks, dinner occasionally, always casual, always with an unspoken understanding that they were circling something neither was quite ready to name. In May, a year after the Orbit 360 dinner, a journalist from a major Auckland newspaper requested an interview. James agreed. The reporter was young, sharp, skeptical. People say you've changed, the reporter said, recorder running. But critics argue this is just sophisticated damage control. How do you respond? I'd say they're right to be skeptical. I'd be skeptical too. Anyone can perform goodness temporarily. Real change takes years to prove, so I'm not asking anyone to believe me now. I'm just asking them to watch and judge me by my actions over time. Do you regret what happened at the gala dinner? James considered the question carefully. I regret that I hurt Hannah Thompson. I regret that it took public humiliation to make me see what I should have seen my whole life, but I don't regret the outcome. That night destroyed who I was, and who I was needed to be destroyed. The interview ran 2 weeks later. It was fair, balanced, neither praising nor condemning. James read it once and then let it go. He was learning that other people's opinions of him mattered less than his own actions. In June, 18 months after everything started, Hannah called him at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Are you busy? She asked. No. Can you meet me? Now. Where? She gave him an address. James drove, his mind racing through possibilities. He arrived at a park near the waterfront in Mission Bay. Hannah sat on a bench facing the harbor, the city lights reflecting off dark water. James sat beside her. She didn't speak immediately. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the tide. I finished my first big case today, Hannah said finally. Domestic violence, mother and 2 children. We got them safe housing, a protection order, full custody, and financial support. The mother cried when I told her. She said I saved her life. That's incredible. I came home and realized I wanted to tell you, not my mum, not my friends, you, and I didn't know what that meant. James waited. I think it means I trust you, Hannah said. Not because you've earned it through some grand gesture, but because you've shown up, consistently, quietly. For 18 months you've just been there. being better, and I think maybe that's enough. She turned to look at him. I'm ready now, if you still want this. James felt his throat tighten. I've wanted this since the moment you walked out of that restaurant, and I realized I'd lost something I didn't know I needed. Hannah smiled. That's very poetic for a businessman. I've been reading poetry, trying to learn to feel things. How's that going? Terribly, but I'm trying. Hannah laughed, and the sound was the most beautiful thing James had ever heard. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. They sat like that, watching the water, the city breathing around them. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of who they used to be. This won't be easy, Hannah said. People will judge us. They'll say I sold out, that you bought forgiveness. Let them say it, and you still have work to do. Being better isn't a destination, it's a practice. I know, and if you ever stop trying, I won't. But if you do, I'll leave. I won't stay with someone who chooses comfort over growth. I understand. Hannah lifted her head, looking at him directly. Okay then. Okay? Okay. She kissed him, soft, brief, a beginning, not a culmination. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Take me home, she said. James drove her back to Manukau, their hands linked across the center console. When they arrived, Hannah kissed him again before getting out. See you Friday? She asked. I'll be there. She disappeared inside, and James sat in his car, his heart full of something he'd never felt before. Not triumph, not possession, just gratitude. Deep, overwhelming gratitude for second chances and women who believed in them. 2 years passed. Not quickly, not dramatically, but in the slow, steady accumulation of ordinary days that build a life. James and Hannah didn't move in together immediately. They didn't rush. They built something deliberately, carefully, testing the foundation with honesty and time. James continued working at Whitmore Construction, though the company looked dramatically different. Revenue had stabilized at a lower but sustainable level. Profit margins were smaller, but employee retention was the highest in the industry. Safety incidents dropped to nearly zero. The scholarship fund had expanded, supporting 23 students across New Zealand. 3 former recipients had already graduated and returned to work for the company, bringing fresh perspectives and genuine loyalty. James no longer worked 70-hour weeks. He left the office at reasonable hours. He spent Saturdays volunteering at the community center, teaching financial literacy to immigrants and young entrepreneurs. He learned to cook, badly at first, then gradually with competence. He read books Hannah recommended. He learned phrases in Te Reo Maori, stumbling over pronunciations until Hannah stopped correcting him and just laughed instead. Hannah thrived at the legal aid clinic. She took on cases no one else wanted, the complicated, messy, heartbreaking situations where justice was elusive and victory meant simply keeping someone safe for another day. She won more than she lost. She slept well at night because she knew her work mattered. She and James often sat together in the evenings, she reviewing case files, he reading reports, existing in comfortable parallel focus. They argued sometimes, real arguments, not polite disagreements. Hannah called him out when he slipped into old patterns, talking over people, assuming his perspective was correct, prioritizing efficiency over empathy. James challenged her when she worked too hard, neglected herself, carried the weight of other people's traumas until her shoulders ached with it. They learned each other's edges, the places where they were still healing, still growing. Margaret remained a constant presence. Sunday dinners at her house became tradition. James learned to arrive early, to help cook, to listen when Margaret told stories about David, about raising Hannah, about the 17 years of invisible labor that built the foundation for everything. He learned that family wasn't something you were born into. It was something you earned through presence and respect. On a Saturday morning in late September, 3 years after the Orbit 360 dinner, James woke in his apartment to sunlight streaming through simple curtains. Hannah lay beside him, still asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow. He watched her for a moment, struck by the impossible luck of this life, that he'd been given a chance to be better, that she'd given him that chance. His phone buzzed. A message from Tom, the foreman. Site inspection at 9 a.m. New safety protocols working great. Workers want to thank you personally. James smiled. He typed back, I'll be there. And Tom, they don't need to thank me. This is how it should have always been. He got up quietly, showered, dressed. He was making coffee when Hannah emerged, wearing one of his old t-shirts, yawning. Morning, she mumbled. Morning? Coffee? Please. He poured 2 cups. They sat at the small kitchen table, the morning easy and unhurried. Hannah checked her phone, scrolling through emails. I have court at 11, she said. Custody case. Should be straightforward. Want me to come? Moral support. She looked up, surprised. You'd do that? If you want me there? Hannah reached across the table, taking his hand. I do, but you have the site inspection. I can move it. Don't. Your work matters too. They finished coffee, moving through the morning routine they'd built together. Shared shower, fighting playfully for space. Hannah stealing his deodorant because she'd forgotten hers. James burning toast while trying to multitask. Small, ordinary moments that somehow meant everything. At noon, they met for lunch. Nothing planned, just a text. Hungry? Hannah suggested the restaurant in Manukau, where they'd had their first real dinner. Taste of home. James arrived first, ordering ginger beers before she got there. Hannah slid into the booth, grinning. Case went perfectly. Full custody to the mother. Supervised visitation only for the father. That's fantastic. How was the inspection? Good. The workers really do seem happier. One guy, Marcus, told me his son just got accepted to university on one of our scholarships. He shook my hand so hard, I thought he'd break my fingers. They ordered the lamb kofta platter, the same dish from 3 years ago. It arrived just as delicious, just as generous. They ate, talking about everything and nothing. Hannah told him about a new case involving wage theft. James told her about a proposal to expand operations into renewable energy construction, building wind farms and solar installations instead of just commercial buildings. That sounds like you, Hannah said. What do you mean? Building something that matters, creating jobs that serve a purpose beyond profit. I learned from the best. Hannah rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. After lunch, they walked through the neighborhood. The weather was perfect. Spring sun, light breeze, jacaranda trees blooming purple along the streets. They passed the house where Hannah grew up. Margaret was in the front garden, pruning roses, wearing gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. Mum! Hannah called. Margaret looked up, smiling. What are you two doing here? Just wandering. Thought we'd say hello. Margaret set down her pruning shears, walking to the fence. Come inside. I made banana bread this morning. They followed her in. The house smelled of baking and memories. Margaret cut thick slices of bread, still warm, slathering them with butter. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same table where Hannah had opened James's invitation 3 years ago, the same table where Margaret had made impossible decisions on a cleaner's salary. How's work, James? Margaret asked. Good. We're launching a new division, renewable energy construction. That sounds expensive. It is, but it's the right thing to do. And it turns out that doing the right thing is actually good business. People want to work for companies they believe in. Margaret nodded approvingly. You've learned well. I had good teachers. They ate banana bread and drank tea, conversation flowing easily. At one point, Margaret looked at James and Hannah sitting together, their shoulders touching, sharing comfortable silence, and something soft crossed her face. You two are good together, she said. Hannah glanced at James. We are, aren't we? Yes, James said simply. Later, walking back to the car, Hannah laced her fingers through his. Do you ever think about that night, the dinner? Every day. Really? It's the moment my life split into before and after. Everything I'm now started because you refused to be small, because you stood up and told the truth even though it would have been easier not to. I almost didn't, you know. I almost just sat there and took it. What changed your mind? Hannah thought about it. My mum. I thought about her waking up at 4:30 every morning, taking 2 buses, cleaning offices for people who never saw her. And I thought, if she can do that with dignity, I can stand up and speak with it. They reached the car but didn't get in. The afternoon was too beautiful, the moment too perfect to rush. "I'm glad you did," James said. "You changed my life. You changed your own life. I just gave you a reason to." James pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Move in with me." Hannah pulled back, eyes wide. "What?" "Move in. Or I'll move in with you, or we find a place together. I don't care. I just want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night." "That's very romantic." "Is that a yes?" Hannah pretended to consider. "Under one condition." "Anything." "We find a place in Manukau. I'm not living in some fancy neighborhood where people don't say hello on the street." James laughed. "Deal." 6 months later, they moved into a small 2-bedroom house 3 blocks from Margaret's place. Nothing extravagant, just a home with a garden where they could grow vegetables, a porch where they could drink coffee in the mornings, enough space for Hannah's law books, and James's attempts at houseplants that kept dying despite his best efforts. Margaret helped them move in, directing traffic like a general commanding troops. She stood in the living room afterward, hands on her hips, surveying their modest furniture and mismatched dishes with satisfaction. "This is good," she said. "This is real." And it was. James continued running Whitmore Construction, but it was no longer his entire identity. He coached youth football on weekends. He attended Hannah's court cases when she asked. He showed up at community events, not for publicity, but because he genuinely cared. He learned that respect wasn't demanded. It was earned through consistency and humility. Hannah built her career defending people who couldn't defend themselves. She won awards for her work. She was offered positions at prestigious firms with salaries that would have changed her life. She turned them all down. Her work wasn't about money. It was about justice. It always had been. On their 4th anniversary of that first real dinner, James took Hannah back to Taste of Home. The same corner booth, the same lamb kofta platter, the same ginger beers. But everything was different. They weren't two people testing possibilities anymore. They were partners, equals. Two people who'd found each other in unlikely circumstances and built something real. 4 years, Hannah said, raising her ginger beer. 4 years, James echoed, clinking bottles. Would you have imagined this back then? James thought about the man he'd been. Arrogant, empty, cruel in his indifference. That man wouldn't have imagined this because that man couldn't conceive of valuing anything he couldn't own or control. "No," he said honestly, "that version of me couldn't imagine being happy with simplicity." He thought happiness was accumulation. And now? Now I know that happiness is this: lamb kofta with the woman I love, a modest house in a real neighborhood, work that matters more than profit margins. Your mother 3 blocks away making sure I'm treating you right. Hannah laughed. She does keep close tabs, as she should. They finished dinner, walking home through streets lined with families and laughter and life lived at a human scale. James thought about the penthouse in Ponsonby, about the view of a city he'd never touched. He didn't miss it, not even a little. And there, walking through Manukau on a Saturday evening, Hannah's hand warm in his, James understood what he'd been searching for his entire life. It wasn't success. It wasn't power. It wasn't the ability to humiliate people without consequence. It was this: connection, purpose, love built on respect rather than possession. A partner who challenged him to be better and believed he could be. A life measured not in dollars, but in moments that mattered. Dignity had never been about class or wealth or status. It had always been about character, about choosing every single day to be someone worth knowing, someone worth trusting, someone worth loving. And in learning that, James Whitmore had finally become someone he could live with. Yeah.